Hi, Assalamualaikum. In this video, we will learn about the trigonometric graph. Right, so basic graph that you have to know is actually, like for example, we have the first one, which is y equal to sine x, and it should start from this 0 and then it goes something like this. All right, it is an sinusoidal graph. All right, so something like that. All right, so let me just sketch it again. All right, so it will be something like this, and if it goes further it will be something like that. All right, and it can also goes to this side. So it must goes to -1 there, and then it goes to 0. Right, it goes to 0 again, and then it goes to 1, and it goes back to 0, something like that. All right, so this is the graph for the sine of x. And then for the cos of x, so it should start with 1, right? So it goes this way, and then it goes downwards. All right, so it goes to this one. All right, so let me just do it again. All right, something like this. We'll go this way. All right, so this one goes to this, and this one goes to this. And if it needs to go further, so it will be something like this. All right, so it will be something like that. Right, so I hope you get the idea. I'm sketching the cosine of x. All right, so it will be something like this. All right, sorry. So it goes this way, and this one will goes this way, this one will goes to this, and it will goes to this one. All right, that's this the graph for the cos of x. And we have for the tangent of x, so you know that for the pi over 2, it is undefined, means that we have an asymptote. So we have something like this. The graph will be moving to this, right? It will never touch that asymptote, that dotted lines there. All right, so the pattern is the same for this one until it goes this is, right? If you have to this one, and then it will goes to that. All right, and then if you have for this one, so it will be something like this. It goes to this way, and this one also goes to this way. All right, okay, so that is for the tangent of x. So this is the basic graph you have to remember. Right, so this is y sine of x, cos of x, and tangent of x. So let's now do something quite new for you. Right, suppose we have your you have the y equal to a sine of omega x minus phi. So this is actually the graph of sine in general form. So this one for the cos of, all right, so a cos of what do we call, omega of x minus phi. And we should note that this a, all right, so this a is actually the amplitude. So if it is negative, so it should be positive. So the amplitude is always a modulus of a. All right, so no matter what values of a, should be positive. All right, so next one is the period. So to get the period, is the formula is actually 2 pi over omega. Right, so 2 pi over omega. All right, so for the phase shift, if it is negative there, so it should be positive. Right, so over omega. All right, so let's look at the for this what do we call amplitude, period, and phase shift for each of these. All right, so suppose for this one, so the amplitude is actually modulus of -4, you get 4, and then the period is actually given by 2 pi over omega. Omega is actually given by this one. The coefficient of x here is actually 1 over 4. All right, so divided by 1 over 4, so this one should be 8 pi. All right, and then if you have for the phase shift, so the phase shift, all right, so you have the what do we call pi over 2. All right, you divide with 1 over 4. Okay, that is phi over omega. So phi over omega, this one is actually 4 pi over 2, so this one will give me a 2 pi. All right, and then for the amplitude for the second one, all right, so look at this value, so it should be 2 over 3 because it should always be positive. Right, for the period, so you start with 2 pi over omega. So this is your omega is actually 4, so your period is actually pi over 2. All right, and for the phase shift, you got pi over 3 divided by your omega is actually 4, so this one will give you a phase shift of pi over 12. Right, so next one, you have the amplitude, which is given by +3. Right, for the period, you start with 2 pi over the coefficient of x is actually 1, so your period should be 2 pi. And then your what do we call phase shift should be given by 2 pi over 2 divided by 1, because the omega is 1, so you get pi over 2. So this is basically amplitude, period, and phase shift. So what does it represent? We'll look at it later. All right, so let's look at this graph, for example. So first we have to identify what is the amplitude for this graph. So the amplitude is actually given by a positive 2, right? So modulus of 2 is always 2. What about the period? So the period should be given by 2 pi over the omega. The omega is actually the coefficient of what do we call x. So this one should be divided by half. So 2 pi multiplied with 2, this one will give us a 4 pi. So our period for this one is 4 pi. What about the phase shift? In this case, we don't have the phi. All right, I'm sorry for my mistake here. The phase shift should be a negative here, right? Because it is positive, right? So this one should be a negative, right? It's a negative pi over 2, right? So in this case, you get 0 for the phase shift because you didn't have phi in this case. So 0 means that if you sketch a graph, all right? So basically, we have to sketch the basic graph, which is cos of x. So suppose this is 1 and this is negative 1. So our cos of x will be something like this. Sorry. Yes, something like this. Okay. Let me just use this one as 1 and this one as negative 1. So it will be something like this. Right? So this is your basic graph, which is cos of x. This is cos of x, all right? But what we are going to draw is actually 2 cos half of x. All right, so you should actually know that your amplitude is actually 2. So instead of 1, it should be 2 here, right? It should be 2, all right? It will be something like that. All right, so what I'm going to draw here now is actually the graph for this, what do you call y, right? Let me have this one a bit longer. I have to use this one. All right. All right, it's better now. Right, so this is x. All right, so I know that my amplitude is actually positive 2. Right, so it should be 2 and negative 2. Right, we have the period, which is 4 pi. So maybe I can start with pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and 4 pi. Right. Let me just make it clear for you. For the cos of x, you have this kind of graph for one complete cycle. Right? It will be something like you start here, you stop here, and then you go to this and this one. So that is for one complete cycle. One complete cycle. But this one, the period is actually 2 pi. But now our period is actually 4 pi. So how do I draw the graph for this one? So we should know that we are actually aiming to sketch this kind of graph. But since our period is 4 pi, it means that one complete cycle is within 4 pi. So it means it starts with 2. So it goes to this one. And then it will go to this. Alright, so now we got the one complete cycle for the cos, right? And the amplitude is actually 2. All right, so that is your amplitude, right? So that's it for this one. All right. Yes, we are done with this one. We don't shift this graph because the phase shift is 0. Means that if it is not 0 here, meaning to say that maybe we have to move this graph to the right, so it will be something like this, right? Something like that. All right, but now we don't have this kind of shifting because the phase shift is 0, so we'll just stop there. So this is actually the graph for the, let's just label it. All right, so y equal to cos half of x, 2 cos half of x. So depending on the question, whether they ask you to sketch from 0 until 4 pi, or if the question asks you to sketch only for the region which is covered from 0 until 2 pi. So from 0 until 2 pi means that you just need to start from this one until this one. You don't have to draw this part, all right? So depending on the question, all right? So maybe for this one, I just want you to draw, to sketch from 0 until 4 pi. All right, let's look at the next one. Suppose we have this one. All right, so let's just identify the amplitude, which is actually a modulus of -3. So this one should be +3. And then our period should be, all right, so 2 pi divided by omega is actually the coefficient of x. So 2 pi divided by pi, this one will give us actually a 2. And our phase shift, all right, so again, we don't have the phase shift here, so we got 0. So let's just sketch the basic graph for the sine of x. So let's say this is 1 and this is -1. So for the sine of x, it will be something like this. All right, so that is your basic graph. Means that your graph will be in this shape, right? So we note that one complete cycle for sine will be something like this, right? So this is half cycle and then this one complete cycle. But this one is for y equals sine of x, because it is in within 2 pi, you get the one complete cycle. But now you are going to sketch, all right? All right, so let me just sketch the, what do we call, x-axis. And I have the, let me just sketch it here, all right. And then I have, let me just do it carefully. All right, so, okay, it'll be something like this. All right, perfect. All right, so this is y and this is x. Now, we note that our period is actually a positive 2. This is our period. What does it mean by 2? Means that your graph for one complete cycle of sine is from 0 until 2. So you don't have that pi and so on. So means that you have something like this one. Suppose I have 1 here and I have 2 here. All right, I don't have this in terms of pi because now our period is actually 2, not 2 pi. All right, please take note of this. And the amplitude is actually positive 3. So let's say I have 1, 2, and 3. All right, so positive 3. Let's just assume a positive 3 is here. All right, so my -3 is here. All right, so how do I sketch this graph? So of course my graph would look like this. All right, so because this is the sine graph, one complete cycle for this sine graph is within this from 0 until 2. Means that I have to start to this. All right, I'm going to this one. And then I'm going to this. Now I got the half cycle. Now I go to this one. And then I got one complete cycle for the sine graph. The amplitude is 3. Alright. And it's one complete cycle is within from 0 until 2. So that one covers the period. Right. From 0 until 2. Do we have to shift the graph? We don't have to. Because now we have the phase shift which is 0. So let's just leave your graph something like this. What if the question asks you, all right, you just need to sketch this graph for the region which is covered for x, which is from -1 until 1. Means that you just need to extend this one. Right? Suppose you have -1. So you just need to extend this, right? Something like this. So the one that is covered by this one is actually from this until this one. So follow what the question wants, all right? So suppose now I just need you to sketch from, what do we call? From 0 until 2, then let's just leave it like that, right? So from 0 until 2, so this is your graph, right? Now, all right, so let me just label this one as a -3 sine of pi of x. I'm sorry, right? This one is actually for the what do we call? Positive 3, right? This one is positive 3. Why? Because we have the usual sine graph. Since our what do we call? Our coefficient here is negative, right? So means that you have to reflect this about the x-axis. So you have this graph actually, right? I'm sorry. You have this one. It should start from 0. All right, it goes this way. Reflect this graph about x-axis. All right, so this one will give us this. So now I have a -3 sine of pi of x. So I'm gonna delete this one. So I've got this one. All right, so be careful when sketching this one. So remember, what does this negative means, right? So it means a lot there. All right, it means you have to reflect about x-axis. All right, let's now see this one. All right, it is a positive graph. All right, So let's just write the amplitude, which is positive 2. And then our period, which is given by 2 pi over the coefficient of x is actually 2. So 2 pi, which is pi. And then we have the phase shift here, right? So since it is negative, so our phase shift will be positive. So we have the phase shift, which is given by 2 pi over 2, which is omega. So this one also pi. So what does it mean? All right, so let's just have the idea that we have to start with y equal to sine of x. So y equals to sine of x should be something like this for one complete cycle within 2 pi. But now we are going to sketch it for one complete cycle within pi. So now I have something like this. Let me just sketch the x-axis first. No, I'm gonna use this one. All right, so that one and this one. All right, so I have this one as y-axis and this one as x-axis. So please note that one complete cycle from 0 until pi. So let's say it is pi here and it is pi over 2 and it is pi here. All right. So what does it mean by one complete cycle? All right, so the amplitude is actually 2 here. Right, so you have 2 and negative 2, right? And the graph is positive 2, right? All right, so now you have to sketch this sine graph for one complete cycle. How does the one complete cycle for sine looks like? It looks like this. Within pi. So within pi means that we have this one half cycle. You have one complete cycle. All right. So if the question asks you to sketch for x, which is from 0 until 2 pi, let's say. So it means that you have to expand this one, right? So 3 pi over 2 until 2 pi, all right? So you have to extend this sinusoidal graph until this one, right? I hope you get the idea. But, all right, but we have not shifted this graph, right? We have to shift this graph, right? I'm not writing this one. We have to shift the graph, all right, by moving it to pi, all right? Pi, all right? So now instead it starts from 0, it should be shifted by pi. All right, so now I'm gonna shift this graph to this one. I'm actually moving it to this one, so I bring it here. Yes. All right, so let's say I don't want this part. This is the part only, all right, for this graph. All right, so this phase shift means that we have to shift. If it is positive, so we move it to the right by pi units, and it looks like this. And we note that one complete cycle is within 2 pi minus pi, which is pi, which is the period, right? So this is the period, right? So depending on the questions, if the question asks you to sketch from pi until 2 pi, then you just stop there. But if the question asks you to sketch from what we call 0 until 2 pi, then you just need to extend this one, something like that. All right, depending on your question. All right, so let's look at this one. All right, so let's start with the amplitude, which is given by positive 2, and then our period, which is given by 2 pi over 1. So this is actually 2 pi, and then our phase shift will be negative because it is positive here. So negative pi over 2 over 1. So this one actually negative pi over 2. Please take note to bear in mind that your cos of x should looks like this, right? So this one is 1 and negative 1. So your cos of x should looks like this, all right? So this is one complete cycle for the cos of x. So this is half cycle. This is one complete cycle. All right, now your amplitude, which is 2. All right, so I'm going to sketch for the, what do we call? Y, which is equal to 2 cos of x first. Right, so I'll have something like, let me just have the x-axis and y-axis. All right, this is y and this is x. Okay, all right, now so I have from, all right, please take note that my period is 2 pi, means that my graph should be 0 pi over 2. Let me just have this one as pi. And then I have 3 pi over 2, and I have 2 pi. So my cos, the amplitude is actually a positive 2. Let me just have it here. Positive 2. And my negative 2 is here, let's say. Right now, I have this graph as, all right, this one, right? Okay, this is my one complete cycle within, what do we call? Within 2 pi, right? My one complete cycle within 2 pi. So, but now I have to shift it first, right? This one is for 2 cos of x, yes, 2 cos of x. But now I want it to be shifted, all right? Because we have the phase shift by half pi, right? Means that you have to shift this graph to the left by pi over 2 unit, right? So means that now I have my graph will be shifted something like this. All right, so this is my graph. It's now shifted, right? Because we have the phase shift here, it is negative, so it will be shifted to the left by pi over 2 units. So now I don't have this one. All right, I hope you get the idea. So this one should be negative, right? Negative pi over 2. But since it is actually a negative, right? So you have to reflect this, right? So I'm not sketching this one. All right, so now I have to reflect this about the x-axis. All right, so I'll have something like this one. All right, I reflect it about the, what do we call, the x-axis, right? I have the green one now. So this is my final graph for the negative 2 cos of x plus pi over 2. Okay, so y equal to negative 2 cos of x plus pi over 2. All right, now okay, that's basically like this. Let's look at this one. All right, so suppose we have this amplitude which is 2, my period which is 2 pi over the coefficient of x which is omega which is 4, therefore my period is actually pi over 2, and my phase shift is positive because it is negative here, so pi over 4. All right, basically our sine graph looks like this. So this is my sine of x. One complete cycle would look like this. All right, now if I want to have, right, this one is y and this one is x, and then I want to have my, please take note that my amplitude is actually a positive 2. All right, so this one is negative 2. All right, basically we want to have one complete cycle of this sine graph within pi over 2. So maybe I can divide this into, all right, let's say I want to have this one as pi over 4, and this one is no, I think this one is pi over 8, and then I have this one as pi over 4, and then I have this one as pi over 2. All right, so pi over 2, half of that one, yeah. Means that pi over 8 plus pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, right? All right, so this one should be 3 pi over 8, because 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, and 4 pi over 8. Yes, pi over 2. All right, now I have this basically this on x-axis, and then we want to sketch the graph for the sine of x. All right, one complete cycle within from 0 until pi over 2. So I already have from 0 until pi over 2. So my one complete cycle of this sine of x will be something like this. Yes, this is my one complete cycle with the amplitude which is 2, and one complete cycle which is from 0 until pi over 2, right? So I follow my period. but now this graph is actually shifted to the right by pi over 4 units, means that you have to shift this, right? Instead of start from 0, it now starts at pi over 4. Right, so my graph would looks like this. It looks like this. All right, yes, it will be something like this. So now it's no more pi over 2 here. Yeah, it's pi over 2, but this one is actually, right, because I have that one as 4 pi over 8, 4 pi over 8, right. Next I have 5 pi over 8, and this one I have 6 pi over 8, or 3 pi over 4, right? 3 pi over 4. So I no more have this one because the blue one is already shifted to the right by pi over 4 units, right? So basically, what does it mean by the period? All right, so let's say your period, right? So if you have your period is actually given by pi, so if you want to sketch your sine of x, so it will be something like this. One complete cycle of sine within the pi, if your period is pi, right? If your cos, it will be something like this, one complete cycle of cos in pi. All right. So I hope you get the idea on what does it mean by the period. And then if you have this shift, means that you have to move this graph. All right, so let's say all right, so let's say you have this graph. All right, so this one is given by pi, and if it is shifted by pi over 4, means that pi over 4 means that you have to move this graph instead of 0, so now it moves something like this. All right, so it will be something like that. Okay, so it is shifted to the right by pi over 4. That one is meant by the phase shift. All right, so the amplitude is actually the height of this graph. And one more important thing, if it is negative, like for example, you have y equal to -3 sine of x, means that instead of sketching this sine of x, so you should actually sketch the reflection of this with x-axis. All right, so the mirror of it. So now instead of having that green one, you have this one, something like that. All right, so I hope you get the idea on sketching this one. So maybe for the next video, we'll look at this sketching of trigonometric graph by transformation. All right, so that's it. Thank you for watching this video.